Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Friends, welcome to another informative, exciting, and engaging episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Michael Hobbs. I'm glad that you're joining us. Comforted. I feel connected to you. But more importantly, I just want to thank you because from where we started just a few years ago to where we're at now, it continues to be a significant impact and force for good in the industry. Just sharing people's stories, allowing people to let us have a little insight into their lives, their professional development, their career, their learnings, and anything else that comes to mind. So thank you for doing what only you can do, and that is subscribing to the podcast, whether you're on Spotify, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, whether you're over there on YouTube, or you just got this right through LinkedIn, whatever it might be. Thanks for that. And more importantly, I know you're going to love this episode because how can you not love Jourdan? So you're definitely going to like the episode as well. So with that, Jourdan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I'm excited to be here and chat all things appraisal.
Oh, well, it's less about appraisal and it's more about you. That's what makes it fun. So, everybody wants to know, Jourdan, were you born this way? Or how did you get into the appraisal and valuation profession at some point in your life?
Yeah, I was not. And being in appraisal was never on my radar.
Join the crowd, Jourdan. That sounds like most people's answer.
I think I stumbled into it the way I think most people do. I don't think anybody, when they're 5, 6 years old, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be an appraiser.
I don't want to be an appraiser. Sounds amazing. Oh my gosh. That ranks right up there with I want to be like a doctor or an astronaut. I'm not.
And I will add to that, since I have been in the profession and gotten out of it, I run across very few people in appraisal. I think I've met maybe 1 or 2 people that, oh, what do you do for work? I'm an appraiser. That doesn't really come up. So I think that just, points to how few people are actually in our industry and how much, the future generation of appraisers is needed. But how I got into it is I went to TCU. I thought I was originally going to go to dental school, but I was doing a gap year because my dad had passed away my senior year of college.
Wow.
So I was working at a hedge fund in Dallas called Highland Capital Management. And I was doing accounts payable and receivable, which is something that I had done for my parents for their businesses growing up, just on a much larger scale. But I understood the purpose of the role and what it entailed. And I was very good at that job. And at the time, everybody on my team and the guy I was dating, they all had their MBAs or masters. And most of the people on my team had done the part-time MBA program at SMU, also in Dallas. And my mom had her MBA, so, I was 23 and very impressionable. And at the time, I thought everybody knew better for me than, what I wanted. And so I applied for the MBA program at SMU. I got in. My plan was to pivot into commercial real estate in some capacity, whether that be, I originally thought I wanted to get into office tenant representation brokerage.
Okay. So
I was working 50 hours a week. I was going to school part-time in the evenings and the weekends. And then, second semester of my second year rolled around and was needing to decide what it was I wanted to transition out of and do. And so I just started taking time to meet with people kind of in all facets of commercial real estate, lending, debt and equity raising, brokerage. And my mom actually went to Mississippi State with one of the founders of BBG, Diane Butler. Yeah. And she got me, she's like, okay, I know you might not want to do appraisal, but you should at least meet with Diane because she, I don't think she'll have bad advice for you, whether that's appraisal or she might know somebody else that wants to hire you. So I met with Diane and Marianne Barnett at BBG. And I just really appreciated the variety that came with appraisal. They both really sold me on, even if you work on a certain property type, you're never going to solve the same valuation problem twice. And I really appreciated that after having been in accounting and doing the same thing every weekend, every month end, every quarter end, every year end, every audit season. I thrive on variety and challenge. And so appraisal, unbeknownst to me, before I had these discussions, actually ended up being a perfect fit for what I was looking for at the time. And two, and I can attest that this is true, everybody that I met with, both at BBG and brokerage, kind of in every facet of commercial real estate, said that being an appraiser is a great foundation for anything I would want to do in the future in commercial real estate. And I did get into commercial brokerage for a while, multifamily investment sales, but it's just so nice being able to, speak more on a more detailed and educated level about other real estate problems once you have been an appraiser. And you really have to understand the fundamentals and how, each piece of the real estate puzzle works together to be an appraiser. And that does prepare you for anything else. Even personally, if you ever decide to buy property, you have a much better understanding of what it is you're taking on. So both personally and professionally, I loved my time as an appraiser, even though I've moved on from it because it taught me just more than I ever could have learned on my own.
That's amazing. And I heard you reference earlier that part of your experience at Highland Capital Management, that hedge fund, was a bit familiar because you had grown up around, it sounds like, entrepreneurial parents.
Yeah, my parents were self-employed my entire life. They had a commercial insurance agency together. And so they started making me pay the bills for them when I was maybe like 8, 9, 10. They're like, you're gonna learn how to you're gonna learn how to, do some work and what the business looks like. And then my mom had a children's clothing boutique of her own. My dad developed houses and he built a few post offices and office buildings. So he was a residential developer with some commercial projects that he did.
Wow.
And then, he had cattle and bought and sold and traded farm equipment, which my brothers kind of followed in his footsteps with that. But yeah, my parents did a little bit of everything.
They really did.
Growing, but I guess you could say I learned the quote unquote accounting side of the business from a very young age.
Well, and you talk about getting exposed to so many different business interests. I mean, it's not enough that your parents just had one lane. You mentioned commercial insurance, but then also getting into having a retail presence with a child clothing store. And then you mentioned your dad being in development, doing residential development, doing like commercial development, and then getting into the farm equipment space and having siblings that are also getting into that space. I mean, it just seems like there was never a dull moment there. It's a Sullivan household.
There wasn't, and I wish I could rewind my childhood because there's so many questions that I would love to ask my parents about real estate that would have made me an even better appraiser and property owner in my adult age. But I just thought, my dad was building these post offices. My brothers and I thought it was fun to stick our hands through the mail slots for the mailboxes.
Oh, absolutely, right?
Or, we'd climb on the piles of bricks or the piles of dirt when they were getting ready to, build houses. So I just thought it was all fun and games when I was little. And I wish I could just rewind and ask my parents, an endless amount of questions about all things real estate development, how they decided, what projects to focus on in real estate. But hindsight is 2020.
It's 2020. That's amazing. And one of the cool things about the podcast is in every episode, there's always, because as you touched on, much like the advice that it sounds like you got from Diane, there's a lot of things that don't repeat. There's a lot of newness. There's a lot of first time experiences. And, you're definitely our first guest who went right into a large firm, but specifically BBG. We've had no one who has had that path yet. So once again, there's always first in every podcast. You get to claim that spot of a first of going straight into the industry by joining BBG. What was it like joining that firm? I assume you joined in Dallas if you went to both TCU and SMU.
Yes, I joined in Dallas, and I was actually one of the first analysts hired that they decided it would be better for analysts to specialize versus generalize. And
Oh, okay.
so I had the very good fortune of joining Brett Wilkerson as his
Mhm.
analyst, as a
Wow.
multifamily analyst.
Yeah.
He had only also ever been an appraiser, so that was a little bit unique because I feel like so few people, maybe I guess he didn't stumble into appraisal as much as the rest of us did since he kind of did that
Yes.
his entire working life. So that was a little bit unique. But by the time I joined his team, he, was well into working on his MAI. He was working on some really advanced projects for lenders that were submitting to HUD for financing. So he was working on about the most complicated multifamily projects that you can work on. So I learned a lot very quickly joining BBG and working for Brett.
Yeah. So what was it like getting to join an established team like that? Obviously, a bit of a lifer, as you mentioned, and joining, Brett, who had always only been in appraisal, and here you've been in so many other things by the time you finally get into the industry. What was that first year like for you, and what were the learnings?
Yeah, I consider myself really fortunate to have been in that situation because I know finding a supervisor for anyone interested in entering the industry is a really big challenge for most people. And I just happened to stumble into what I would say is one of the most fortunate situations somebody could, on an established team with, pretty generous production numbers
Yeah.
at a firm at a nationwide firm that's, well established with a good client base. So, yeah, I was very lucky to be in that situation. And back to my point of just there being a lot of variety, I was working on proposed deals, I was working on deals that were getting refinanced, I was working on deals that were being bought and sold. So there was no situation that was the same any day that I was in the office working, even though I was only working on apartments.
Sure. I think that's fascinating. What I appreciate about what you're sharing, Jordan, is since your experience came right into the commercial side of the business, and that's quite common for those that get the opportunity to work in that environment. A lot of people, from a numbers standpoint in the industry, are in residential. And even if they've worked in a large firm, residential doesn't have as much historically the same of that team approach that you had the opportunity to join when you were with Brett and that established team with established production and just a wide variety of assignments. What was the progression like joining a team in terms of like what you started on and then how you learned that and then you continued to advance into both your general knowledge of appraisal, but then more specifically as you went into specialization and took on more opportunities, becoming from an analyst getting to an appraiser?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I joined BBG straight out of my MBA program from
Mm.
SMU.
Yeah.
So I was working a very entry level job with
Mm.
very above entry level skills. So that
Oh,
was
no.
helpful just that was helpful just from the perspective that I think it did allow me to progress very quickly, which again, I think is not typical, right? And I knew that, getting it's not your analyst like license, but trainee license.
Trainee,
Yeah,
licensee.
I knew getting that was important. So I started working on that while I was finishing up my classes at SMU. I
Oh,
think
good
I
for
got
you.
that within my first 2 or 3 months of being at BBG.
Nice job.
And then I'm one of those people where if I stop something, it's going to be a lot harder to pick it back up.
Oh,
So
sure.
I knew if I stopped taking classes, to get my appraisal license and eventually my MAI, I wasn't sure I was ever going to do it. And I know both of those things, at least in commercial, getting your certified general license and then getting your MAI, if that's something you want to do, are both really important for helping build your book of business, for helping you, get those higher fee assignments, for being able to speak to clients on a, higher level about the valuation problems they have. But it's laughable now because I think one of the first days in the office, he's like, "Okay, so you're just going to enter this rent roll today." And I think I spent almost all 7 or 8 hours I was in the office that first day entering a rent roll for maybe 150 to 200 units. I can probably enter a rent roll for 200 units in about 10 minutes now.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So I will say, I do think the learning curve is steep for appraisal, especially if it's something you've never done before. I would say I was somebody that came into it, with some knowledge because I, specialized in real estate for my MBA at SMU. My parents had been in real estate growing up. So I feel like I came in with adequate and appropriate prior knowledge to be able to pick it up pretty quickly. And it still took me, it still took me a while to catch on and figure out, who's who and what's what. And then I'm somebody that, I was like collecting demographic information and, population and rent roll and comps and tax comps. And I had no idea why I was required to find tax comps for the longest time. And so
Sounds really
I, I just, I'm somebody that needs to know the big picture, right? Like,
Yes.
why is this information that I am collecting important, and like, why does that matter to the work that you need to do on the valuation on the back end, as it's so called? So I just struggled for a while because I felt like I was just kind of aimlessly collecting information that wasn't being used. Let me tell you, when I started writing reports and all the dots started connecting, I was like, this work I was doing was invaluable. And it's obvious if you're working on a team, it saves the senior appraiser a lot of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, once all those dots started clicking, I just, I felt like there was a lot of purpose in what I was doing, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. Again, hindsight's 2020. I didn't know what I didn't know at the time because I was new. And it's hard to explain all that to somebody, day one or week one or month one in the industry. But it was really satisfying to see all that come together a little bit later in my career. So I was Brett's analyst for about 6 months, and then he moved to Denver to be the managing director of the BBG office there.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I switched teams and started working for Ryan Wegman, who was also an analyst that had worked for Brett. And I worked on a few assignments with Ryan before. So that was a really easy transition. And I would
Yeah.
say once Brett was not in the Dallas office, Ryan was probably the guy that knew the most about multifamily. So again, very fortunate that was the situation. So I worked for Ryan for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, while I was working on getting my certified general appraisal license.
Oh, good.
So, so I got my certified general in December of 2018, and I'd started at BBG in May of 2016
Wow,
for
nice.
reference.
That's great.
And after that, I started chipping away
Nice.
at the advanced classes to get my MAI. I probably could have gotten through that a little quicker, but as you know, the experience component of that, rightfully so, is you can get through all the education pretty
Oh,
quickly.
absolutely.
I was taking I think I took two advanced classes a year. Maybe there's one year where I took three. But yeah, the experience component there is what prevented me from getting that even quicker than I did. But I got my MAI in January of 2020, so right before COVID.
Wow.
So it took me a little less, or maybe right at 3.5 years from when I entered appraisal as an analyst to getting my MAI. It's funny because I actually ended up getting my MAI before both Brett and Ryan, but
What?
that's
Are you kidding me? I love that, man. You've gotten your
no, but
MRI before Brett and Ryan.
I will say, I feel like at the time they were, like eyeballs deep in production, and
Oh, of course, of course.
Brett got married and they both had kids, so they had a lot going on. I just had me to worry about, so I could getting my MAI was my focus. They were living life a little bit more, so but they both have it now, so all good.
That is phenomenal. Congratulations to you for really being diligent about getting your designation so early on.
Thank you. I think, at least for the team that I was on, it was very important. And it was actually a requirement from the clients that hired BBG that
Oh, really?
somebody with an MAI sign off on those reports. So I didn't really know anything different. I didn't really know it. I mean, I knew it was an option to not have my MAI, but I just knew to continue to do the work, you know, that generated those high fees and was going to lead to a better, financial future for me as quickly as possible. It was in my best interest to get my MAI and to continue working on some of those more complicated assignments.
That's phenomenal. So as you had that opportunity to go from Brett to Ryan, and then you get your MAI and you're working with a client, what type of work did you move towards opposed to where you started from?
I pretty much worked on the same thing. So after I got licensed, I was still working some for Ryan and then doing some assignments completely on my own. And then at one point, Ryan and I shared an analyst. But when I was still with VBG, and then I joined VMG Health to focus on healthcare real estate for
Oh, really?
6 months. Then I moved to Chicago. Long story, but while I was still at VBG, I was working on the same assignments as I had been when I came in as an analyst. So that was an easy transition too, because I already knew the type of work and what the clients expected, what the timelines were, what the valuation scenarios could be. I mean, really the only thing at that point that was different was, the location or the type of property it was, whether it was, affordable or market rate or mixed income. But I was fortunate to have been exposed to all of those different scenarios and, property types before I had started working on my own. So I feel like I joke that I'm a one-trick pony because I only really know multifamily. And then fortunately, keep saying fortunately, but a lot of things worked out really well for me in my appraisal career. I did when it came time for me to do my demo for my MAI, I did capstone, and they assign you, there's 3 different property types you can be assigned.
Tell me they gave you the multifamily.
I think I kissed the ground when it was the apartment.
I mean, and that one was that one in Austin? I'm trying to remember where that asset was.
Do you remember? Yes, it was in Austin.
It was definitely in Texas.
Yeah, and
I remember that much of it. I had the same one. And
yeah, so it was an apartment in Texas.
Wow.
It was my bread and butter at the time that my capstone project came. And I think most of the people in my capstone class had never touched multifamily or knew very little about it. So everybody really struggled. And that would have been me had I gotten the office, or I think the other option was retail. Like I really would have struggled had I gotten one of those other property types. But I was so lucky, and I had a lot of historical reports and knowledge to pull from to pull my capstone report together, and luckily passed the first time. I didn't have to do any revisions, so that was a blessing.
You didn't have to do any revisions? Oh
no.
I had to do revisions. I actually developed a good relationship with the guy who reviewed my stuff, and he's like, hey, he's like, you never done this before, have you? I'm like, what gave it away? He goes, there's just things that didn't exactly knit together. He said, but it's clear that you can how you can appraise. I was like, yeah, I've been investing for a long time, like real estate. I've learned real estate from the ground up. He goes, you can tell you have an understanding of it. It's just, there's some pieces here, and it took one revision, and and then I got through it. But I remember when I saw that, I was like, oh, I'm like, where's the industrial one? I'm like, please, like, no industrial. You get multifamily. Okay. We've since done tons of multifamily, so it was a great launch for us, but for me and obviously the team that I built. But yeah, I totally can appreciate being able to be in Texas and be like, oh my gosh, look, it's multifamily. I mean, how amazing! Wow, that is something else. And then you got that opportunity. You mentioned to move over into healthcare, which is that's a little different from multifamily.
The market right now is tough for appraisal companies. Many companies are having a hard time getting enough work with the same marketing they used to. Is your company struggling, having a hard time getting new customers, or getting additional work from existing customers? The answer to this problem is easier than you think. Do more business with the people you already know. Over 10 years, the average U.S. appraisal firm meets over 17,000 potential customers. That's a lot of people you could be doing business with right now. But it's a big problem if you don't have a proven process to communicate with them. StoryLex turns this problem into an opportunity to grow. Our advanced AI marketing tool can rebuild your contact lists and harvest long-forgotten communications. Imagine reaching out to everyone you've ever met with just one click. For the cost of 1 or 2 appraisals a month, StoryLex helps you reconnect and market to people who already know you, like you, trust you, and want to do business with you. Act now by contacting StoryLex today to turn your business growth dreams into reality. Email appraisal@storylux.com. That is appraisal at storylux.com. And now back to part 2 of the episode.
Yeah, it is. So as I had mentioned, back at the very beginning, how did you get into appraisal?
Yeah.
I thought I grew up thinking I wanted to be a dentist, and that's what I thought I wanted to do even after graduating college. So I had always had an interest in healthcare, and I was aware that healthcare evaluation was a specialty, and BBG, even at the time, they had asked if I was interested in working on some healthcare evaluation projects because they were just starting the healthcare team there.
Oh, I see.
I think I was just kind of in the weeds of multifamily at the time and felt really comfortable and, you know, good in that lane and trying to just become a go-to, as good as Brett and as good as Ryan and as good as Mary. And like I wanted to be, a go-to for all things
Sure.
multifamily valuation at VBG and beyond. So didn't didn't join the healthcare team at BBG, but BMG Health came to me again. And as back to the SMU network was really helpful to me. So the guy heading up the team at BMG Health was an SMU guy.
Yeah.
He saw that I was, and so they came to me and asked if I'd be interested in joining their team. And I had always had that interest in healthcare evaluation, even though it is different than multifamily. And so I said sure, and joined BMG Health.
Oh, wow.
That was a really great experience as well. Very different. So again, as much as I knew and, was working on my MAI at the time because I still didn't have it when I joined BMG. But as much knowledge as I gained and as much as I knew, again, I think the learning curve for any other property type than the one you know best is a steep learning curve. Once you learn it, all the pieces kind of click together much easier. But coming from appraisal, multifamily appraisal to healthcare appraisal,
Yeah.
that transition that transition was not easy. But I loved working at VMG and, getting to know, learning how to value a different property type. I think that was great for my growth as an appraiser and just a professional in general. Figuring out how to navigate challenges and ask the right questions that I probably hadn't previously been asking as a multifamily specialist. Loved working at VMG, but I got the opportunity to relocate to Chicago. And as somebody who had grown up in the DFW area and always,
Sure.
I ended up in Fort Worth for college. I was working in Dallas after college. I grew up an hour northeast of Dallas. I wanted to relocate. My dad said one of his only regrets in life was that he never moved away from DFW.
Oh,
He
really?
said, you're always welcome to come back here, but he goes, I think it would be really good if at some point, he's told my brothers the same thing, but if you, go experience somewhere else. So I'd always had that in the back of my mind as much as I was loving, working in Dallas and establishing myself as a professional here. But JLL contacted me about moving to Chicago and joining their office there because they needed a multifamily specialist.
Oh, I see.
Even though Chicago is headquarters for JLL, they had not a single multifamily appraiser in that headquarters office. So
Wow. That's interesting.
they needed someone. I had always wanted to relocate, so best of both worlds. I got what I needed from it. They got what they needed. So I moved from Dallas to Chicago in November of 2019. I had hoped to stay on with VMG, but they said I couldn't work remotely since everybody's required to be in the office. But if you're putting that timeline together, November 2019 was just a few months before everybody got to work from home about March 2020 due to COVID.
Oh, wow.
So that was a bummer. But joined JLL up there on their multifamily team and just wasn't loving the cold. My dog didn't love living in a high
Oh,
rise.
no.
So
Which months did you
uh,
arrive in Chicago? I mean, there's a lot easier way to get an onboard to Chicago if you're not starting in the winter.
so I was there, my first few days were okay. And then there was some really freak cold front that came through and everything was frozen. There's like several inches of snow. And I was like, I don't know that I can stay up here if it's going to be like this all
Oh,
winter. But
no. That's terrible. Sorry to hear that's the experience. I mean, I'm not from there either, but I do call it home these days. And it's much easier to start in a city like Chicago if you start concurrent with the baseball season, which is basically, sometimes chilly spring that goes into spring that goes into summer, as opposed to, it sounds like you showed up right in the midst of football season, which is, you know, snow and ice sometimes and cold wind.
yeah, again, I would say I was very fortunate because I was at home in my condo that I was renting, listening to the news, and the weather came on, and they were discussing how the winter I was there had been the mildest they had on record since they started recording over like 125 years ago. So
Oh my
I was
gosh.
I was very grateful because I didn't think that first winter was too bad.
Yes. Oh, that is something else. So it sounds like you didn't stay in Chicago very long, is what I'm inferring from what you mentioned.
No, my lease was signed for at least a year, maybe 13 months, but I did not stay very long. I was back and forth to Texas during COVID
Wow.
and then just decided that is not where I wanted to stay. So I moved back to Dallas. And then in the interim over the summer, I had rejoined BBG. Yes, and so when I rejoined, I was not on a team. So I didn't have an analyst, I didn't have a supervisor.
Okay.
I was a one man show multifamily
Yeah,
specialist, which that was fine because I was very comfortable with all
sure.
facets of that, right? From the research,
Yeah.
from me starting as an analyst to taking on solo assignments and working on more of the back end with Ryan once I got licensed. So that was something that I was very comfortable with and felt very lucky to have the opportunity to rejoin BBG because I love
Mm,
I love everybody that works there, has worked there. One of the best experiences I've had professionally.
that's amazing.
So rejoined BBG, I was working as a one man show,
So what
working
was
on
the
some very
I
go
know
ahead.
I'm interrupting you. I've been curious because you've talked about the opportunity to work on a team with someone else. You've talked about the opportunity to work with someone else and have an analyst. Now you're talking about that being, that one person individual. How is it different? Because a lot of people don't have the experience or exposure that you've gained in the time you were in the profession. What's that like? Like, how is it different when you're working on the team versus when you're with someone else sharing an analyst versus when now, you're more experienced than you have been in the past, but you're back to working on your own. How does the work vary? And how you handle the assignments change?
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to both. I think that list includes, only being on your own timeline versus being on somebody
Yes.
else's timeline when you're working on part of a team. The benefit of being on a team is that it's not 100% on you to get a report done. It's a team
Yes.
effort. The flip side of that coin is if somebody on the team is not doing what they're supposed to, it affects more than that one person. And that can get a little stressful too. When I was working on my own, if I was behind, I knew that was completely my fault. Didn't have anybody to blame. I would say it's a lot more pressure working completely on your own because,
Yes.
you're responsible for everything from the cover on page 1 to the table of contents and all the exhibits on page 226 or however long the report may be. On a pretty tight timeline, all things considered. My timelines were a little bit longer than some of the bank or agency jobs.
Mm,
My turn times were probably anywhere from 3 weeks to a month.
yeah.
But in that same time frame, I had maybe 2 or 3 assignments to complete. So
Mm,
had a little bit longer time to do those. And I did too when I was working with Brett and Ryan, just because of the nature of our work.
yeah.
But I think the balance of appraisal just gets tricky, and we can talk about this. But I got out of appraisal, and had discussions back in the spring about maybe getting back into it. But the company that I interviewed with and the guys that have been doing this a lot longer than me, they're still telling me how they have this crunch. And so I just don't think that crunch to get everything done on a timeline, if a client doesn't get you the information you need, or if your calls
Yeah.
aren't getting returned to like confirm cap rates or sale prices. So these people that I could tell were a lot more knowledgeable and efficient than me.
Mm-hmm.
They were just explaining how that crunch never goes away. And I said,
Wow.
for those reasons, I'm out. It's
I
just a
totally,
lot of
I
pressure.
totally
I think
respect that. I mean, that's,
the
yeah,
beauty of appraisal,
yeah, totally
the
get that.
beauty of appraisal is that you don't have to be in an office. You can work from anywhere you want.
Yes.
Work anytime you want. The other side of that coin is there are no 8 to 5 hours. The work doesn't stop at the end of the
Mm,
workday.
yep.
You are on a deadline that you have promised and committed to the client to get this report done by. And that can be tough if you are running behind because, you want to do a good job, you want to get everything to the client on time, but that can be tough to, hit those deadlines if something goes wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely tough. What an interesting challenge. And yet, most of your time in appraisal even with your designation was around an asset, the same asset. So obviously you're becoming more proficient, generally more aware. And as you said, your ability to do a rent roll sometime later compared to that first day you were there doesn't take you 8 hours to get it done. Oh my gosh, that is absolutely wild. And so you get this opportunity to go back to BBG. How was that experience? Did you stay there with the idea that, or did you go there with the idea that that was, this is your future? Or was it like, hey, I'm just back, I'm getting back into appraisal and, I'm still quite young and I have a huge career ahead of me?
No, so it was my intention to stay with BBG because, like I mentioned, I really liked the company and the people that I worked with. My intention was to go back and to kind of have more of a hybrid position. So
Yeah.
maybe write reports percentage of the time. And then I was really interested in helping develop new business and,
Mm,
become more of a director or managing director one day, bringing in the assignments and stepping out of that report writing role.
yes.
But this was August of 2020 to April or March of 2022. So this is
Sure.
when things were kind of booming again post COVID. And I did not find that I had the time to, meet my production goals and get my reports written and also find time in the day to go out and develop relationships with
Sure.
potential clients or clients we already had to see, how BBG could be more of an asset to them. And I I had moved to Charlotte, North Carolina at this point in time
Oh, really? Wow,
and
you get all
had
kinds of
some
experience.
just all over. But back to my original plan, I had always had an interest in brokerage.
Okay.
And after I got my MAI and I was working on some really complicated assignments, I just kind of saw that that was my future. I said, okay, gosh, how old was I at the time? I think I was like 30, 31.
Okay.
And so I said the options are basically the option was to build a team. If I wanted to get out of a report writing role, my options were to build a team. I did not feel that I loved appraisal enough to encourage anybody else to make that their career choice.
Totally.
I'm grateful for my experience in appraisal, but I think compared to some other job roles and positions that you can get in commercial real estate, it is really, really hard to sell somebody on appraisal for a number of reasons. Having to have a college degree and then having to spend more time and money on education and classes once you've graduated college. And then, to get your trainee license and then get your certified general. And then if you get your MAI, it's a whole process. And compared to other entry level commercial real estate positions, appraisal probably is the bottom of the barrel as far as money you can make and you know, what you can make once you have your license or maybe once you get your MAI. Like once I became licensed, I pretty much made double what I was making immediately.
Yeah.
But the ramp up time, I think, for appraisal to get to somewhere where you're making a decent living for yourself is a lot longer than some other positions in the industry. And I think that's a hard sell as well.
Got it.
So had the opportunity to join a investment sales team focused on multifamily in Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that would be a great position for me. Yes, I would need to learn the Carolinas a little bit more, but I knew that there was nobody on that brokerage team that had better knowledge of multifamily properties and how they worked than
Absolutely.
I did. Coming in with almost 7 years of multifamily experience and an MAI and working on some really complicated projects. So I knew that that would be a tremendous asset, not only to me joining the team, but to the clients of that firm who are looking to buy or sell with us.
Wow.
So that's how I got that's how I got into and then eventually subsequently got out of appraisal.
Oh my gosh. So the lure of investment brokerage is specifically in an asset class that you'd come to know so well, takes you to greener pastures and an East Coast city.
Yeah, it was a really exciting opportunity, and I joke kind of all the time that my timing has been really bad my entire professional career. So
Okay.
I joined that brokerage firm in May of 2022, which is
Okay.
about the time that the Fed cranked up the interest rates and pretty much all investment sales activity came to a screeching halt. So
Oh my
nobody
God.
was buying, nobody was selling. So I joined the brokerage team. There probably couldn't have been a worse time to make a
Wow.
transition to a different type of work. So that was a little bit short-lived, but still good experience.
Mm-hmm. That is something else. So did you go back to appraisal?
So my mom passed away and I moved back to the
No.
Dallas area from Charlotte, and I needed something that was easy and remote and used a lot fewer brain cells than these really complicated multifamily assignments I've been working on required. So I actually am still with JSX, which is a semi-private public charter aviation company based out of Dallas, and I help train the customer support new hires there at JSX. But it's remote, it's flexible, and allowing me to get done what I need to do in the
Yeah.
interim. And as I mentioned, I did interview back in the spring to rejoin a firm,
Oh, okay.
not BBG, but somebody
Somebody else. I know
a
there
different
are all
national.
other firms in the industry. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, so another, national, a firm with a national presence, much smaller than BBG, but again, an SMU guy had come to me and said, "Hey, we are looking to add some people to the Dallas office. Would you just have the discussion?" He goes, "You don't have to say yes, you don't have to do it, but at least come meet with me and come meet with the partners and see if that's something you'd be interested in
Oh, excellent.
revisiting."
Yeah.
And so I did, but I just, again, if I were to ever get back into appraisal, it would need to be something where I wasn't writing reports 100% of the time at this
Sure.
point in my career. And I
Hmm.
would be interested in client development and more that side of the business at this point. But they were looking, I had expressed that to them, and
Yeah.
they were looking for somebody to just come in and be a workhorse and get the report writing done, and that's just something that I was not willing to take back on.
I totally understand and appreciate that. And it's a beautiful thing to know what you want to do and know what you don't want to do. And some people absolutely love that. I've got like some members on my team that's all they want to do. They're like, please do not put me in client facing positions. They're like, matter of fact, I don't even want to go to the property. I want to research and write. I'm willing to call people on the phone and talk to them, but like, I don't actually want to show up somewhere and like go to events and have to just like, please don't do that. And I have other people, they're like, oh my goodness, please don't make me sit in a little room without windows. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm one of those sitting at my computer all day at home, and Word and Excel was not I was not thriving. I will say I was very, very good at the work that I was doing, but I did not jump out of bed in the morning excited to write another multifamily appraisal report.
I totally get that. Wow. Well, I mean, given again, you've accomplished so much at such an early stage of your life, and there's, so much great stuff ahead for you in your life, personally, professionally, because you just know that generally that's kind of how life goes. Well, as you look out over the next 3 to 5 years, what are you looking forward to or optimistic about?
I I think just kind of the possibilities, right? So I've always in the back of my mind, I'm the oldest child, I'm the oldest female. So if any of you out there listening, you know the responsibilities that come along with that and the expectations. And so, it is sad that at such a young age I have lost both of my parents.
It really is.
But at the same time, I no longer, have to be tied to this geographical area
Mhm.
or, continue doing what I've done in the past. The world is literally my oyster. I could, decide I want to be a scuba diving instructor in the Philippines. I just the world is truly my oyster, and I don't know what the next thing is, and that's really exciting.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. I mean, to have that sense of possibility and really, undefined pathways. Congratulations. That's really encouraging to hear.
Thank you. It's exciting, but I feel like I'm somebody that most of the time has a hard time making a decision, which was one of my challenges as an appraiser. I definitely fell prey to having analysis paralysis, and
Mhm. Yeah.
I would have my entire report written, and then, I had to decide on the value and why I thought that should be the value, and I got really hung up on that. So, you know, I I admire the appraisers that are really decisive and just can support it and move on. I'm like,
Yes.
okay, like that could be the right valuation, but is there more right valuation?
Yes.
So I got hung up there sometimes too.
Oh my gosh. I understand what you're talking about. That's quite a common and familiar experience. Wow. Well, Jordan, I really appreciate you joining us, sharing a little bit of your perspective. It's wonderful to get to hear from someone who so early on in their career got into the profession and actually got out of it, but accomplished a lot while there. Because that's what's the beauty of this podcast is no two people's paths are the same. Their experiences and perspectives are not equal in the sense of how it impacted them and what they did with it. And wow, I mean, look at you. Who knows? Next time we talk to you, you may just own a commercial real estate brokerage and you're just crushing multifamily.
I'm not really sure what tomorrow brings, but that's not out of the realm of possibility. But I will reiterate again how grateful I am
Yeah.
to Appraisal, because I think that's been integral to both my life personally and professionally. I think it teaches you a lot of skills that are valuable no
Mhm.
matter what you do. So if anybody's considering it, I don't think it's it's a wrong. You can't go wrong doing appraisal for any amount of time.
I am thrilled to hear that. That inspires us for an upcoming season of the podcast. So I appreciate you pointing that out there. And I just want to again say thanks for accepting the offer to be a guest here on Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast, Jordan.
Yes, thanks for having me, Michael.
Wonderful, wonderful. Friends, thanks for joining us for an insightful 45 minutes or so to follow the yellow brick road of the path so far lived and pursued by Jordan. And, we look forward to some point in 2026 getting a chance to catch up and finding out what's next for her. Who knows? She may be in the Philippines as a dive master, helping you when you go on vacation there to learn to be a scuba diver. So thank you for liking the podcast. Definitely add the comments. And of course, thank you for doing what only you do, and that is sharing the good news of other people's paths and perspectives. Until next time, have a fantastic day. And again, Jordan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.